Hi everyone, I'm Sarah, and I want to share a story with you that changed my life forever. Have you ever felt like you're pouring your heart, soul, and wallet into people who see you as nothing more than a convenience? Today, I'm going to tell you about the moment I discovered that sometimes the people closest to you can hurt you the deepest. This is my story about financial manipulation, emotional abuse, and the courage it took me to walk away from toxic family dynamics. If you've ever felt taken for granted by the people you love most, my story will speak directly to your heart. I had always been the reliable one in my family. Every November, like clockwork, my phone would buzz with messages from our family group chat. My sister Emma would be coordinating who was bringing what dish to our mother Linda's house for Christmas. Cousin Jake would be asking about airport pickup times, and someone would inevitably share that ridiculous spreadsheet our Aunt Patricia made every year, ranking everyone's contributions to the holiday feast. But that November was different. I checked my email that Tuesday morning, expecting the usual flood of family coordination messages. Nothing. I refreshed my inbox twice, then a third time, thinking maybe my internet was slow. Still nothing. That familiar knot started forming in my stomach, the one that appeared whenever I sensed something was wrong but couldn't quite put my finger on it. The silence felt strange, almost unnatural. For the past 8 years, I'd been getting at least 5 emails a day by this time in November. Emma's color-coded spreadsheets about seating arrangements, Jake's flight itineraries, Mom's endless lists of who was allergic to what. The absence of these messages was like walking into a room where familiar furniture had been removed. You notice the empty spaces before you understand what's missing. Later that afternoon, I opened our shared Google Drive folder, where the family always uploaded gift registries, dinner playlists, and Patricia's famous food ranking spreadsheet. The folder was gone, not archived, not moved, completely deleted. I clicked on old bookmark links, tried accessing it through my recent files. Every attempt met the same cold response. Access denied. My hands started trembling slightly as I checked my browser history, thinking maybe I'd misremembered the folder name. But there it was in my search history from just 2 weeks ago, Family Christmas Planning 2023. I'd added a recipe for my famous green bean casserole, the one everyone always requested but somehow forgot to thank me for making. I sent a casual text to Emma. "Hey, did you take down the family folder?" I tried to keep my tone light-friendly, giving her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe there was a technical issue. Maybe they were reorganizing things. Maybe. 38 minutes passed before my phone buzzed with a response. But it wasn't from Emma. It was from our mother Linda. "I figured you'd be busy this year. Don't stress about Christmas. No, how are you? No, we missed you last year. No, is everything okay?" Just a line crafted to sound caring while feeling like a door slamming shut. I stared at that message for a long time, reading it over and over, trying to find some warmth in the words that just wasn't there. The tone was wrong, too casual for such a significant announcement. It reminded me of how you'd cancel a dentist appointment, polite but detached, like it didn't really matter either way. I took a screenshot, though I wasn't sure why yet. Something deep in my gut told me I might need proof of this moment later. That night, I lay in bed with my phone face down on the nightstand, feeling something inside my chest rearrange itself. I wasn't crying. I'd stopped crying over predictable cruelty years ago. But I felt a shift, like furniture being moved in a room I'd lived in my whole life. The exclusion hadn't started that November, and as I lay there in the darkness, memories began surfacing like bubbles in still water. My mind drifted back to last year's Christmas disaster. I'd arrived 30 minutes late, after a client meeting ran longer than expected. My arms were full of carefully chosen gifts and a tray of homemade cookies I'd baked at midnight after a 14-hour workday. When I walked into Linda's living room, every chair around the dining table was occupied. Not one person looked up to greet me. The conversation continued as if I hadn't entered the room at all. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, holding my offerings, waiting for someone to acknowledge my presence. "Look who finally decided to show up," someone had muttered, I never figured out who. The entire table erupted in laughter, the kind that makes you feel like the punchline of a joke you weren't told. I ended up eating my Christmas dinner standing at the kitchen counter, with a paper plate and no napkin, watching my family bond over conversations that seemed designed to exclude me. At the time, I'd made excuses for them. People get stressed during holidays, plans change. Maybe they genuinely forgot I didn't eat beef, or that I'd been bringing the deviled eggs to family gatherings for 8 years straight. The eggs that no one ever thanked me for, but always finished before dessert was served. I remembered other moments too, now that my mind was making connections I'd previously ignored. The family photos where I was somehow always at the edge of the frame, half cut out or slightly blurred. The birthday celebrations where my gift cards were mixed in with everyone else's, making it impossible to tell who had contributed what. The holiday newsletters where my achievements were mentioned in passing while Emma's career updates took up entire paragraphs. But now, sitting in my quiet apartment with Linda's dismissive text glowing on my phone screen, I realized those moments hadn't been accidents, they'd been auditions. My family had been testing my tolerance for disrespect, seeing how much I'd accept before I finally pushed back. And I'd passed every test with flying colors, absorbing each slight with grace and coming back for more. I opened my laptop and pulled up my personal budgeting spreadsheet. My eyes found the line I'd been staring at for 3 years straight. December mortgage $1,847.50, recurring auto payment. The same amount had been leaving my checking account every month since 2020, quietly funding the very house where my family was planning to celebrate Christmas without me. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was paying for their gathering place while being told I wasn't welcome to gather. I was funding their family home while being informed I wasn't really family. The mortgage payment that I'd set up as a temporary favor had become as automatic as breathing and just as unnoticed by everyone except me. I closed the spreadsheet without deleting anything, but something fundamental had shifted in my chest. If I wasn't invited to be part of this family, why was I the one paying for their gathering place? 5 days later, I was unpacking groceries, milk, bread, and a bottle of wine I probably wouldn't open, when my phone rang. Linda Mom flashed across the screen in all caps because I'd never bothered updating the contact name after getting a new phone 2 years ago. I set down my bag of apples and hit play on the voicemail. Linda's voice was flat and rehearsed, like she was reading from a script someone else had written. The family talked and we just think it might be easier if you don't come this year. It's nothing personal. We all agreed. You know how things get. We all agreed. Those 3 words hit me like a physical blow. Not I've been thinking, or this is hard for me. No hesitation, no sorrow, no acknowledgement that this might hurt. Just a verdict delivered with the emotional warmth of an automated customer service message. I played the voicemail again, listening for any trace of regret or uncertainty in her voice. There was none. She sounded like she was reading the weather forecast, informative but detached. I wondered how many times she'd practiced those lines, how long the family had discussed the exact wording before settling on this particular combination of dismissal and fake concern. That evening, I discovered I'd been removed from the family group chat entirely. The thread that used to be called Holiday Chaos had been renamed The Real Ones, subtle I thought bitterly. My name no longer appeared in the member list. When I searched for last year's thread labeled Christmas Coordination, it had vanished completely. Not deleted, archived somewhere I couldn't access. I spent an hour that night going through my phone, looking for traces of family conversations I knew I'd been part of. Text threads, email chains, photo shares, all gone or edited to exclude me. It was like watching someone erase me from existence, one digital footprint at a time. Around 10 o'clock, scrolling through social media against my better judgment, I found a post from my cousin Maya that made my stomach drop. It was a group photo of 12 smiling faces gathered around Linda's dining table. The caption read, "Doing what's best for the whole family isn't always easy, but it's worth it. Ash family." First tough choices. I zoomed in on the photo, recognizing every face around that table. Emma was raising a wine glass in a toast. Uncle Frank was laughing with his head thrown back. Linda sat at the head of the table, with her hand on Maya's shoulder, looking like a queen who'd just made a difficult but necessary decision for the good of her kingdom. There was no empty chair for me, no place setting held in hope. No space that suggested they might still change their minds if I apologized for whatever crime I'd apparently committed. This wasn't a spontaneous decision made in the heat of holiday stress. This was a planned execution, complete with photographic evidence of their unity without me. The timestamp on the photo showed it had been taken 3 days before Linda left me that voicemail. They'd already voted me out and celebrated their decision before bothering to inform me. I was the last to know about my own exile. The next morning brought a text from Emma that cut deeper than Linda's voicemail. "You always made things tense. Honestly, it's better this way." Then, like a footnote she'd been saving for years, "You were never really good at being part of this family." I read those words 3 times, each reading revealing new layers of cruelty. Never really good at being part of this family. As if being family was a skill I'd failed to master, a test I'd been failing my entire life without realizing I was being graded. I thought about all the family events I'd attended over the years, trying to pinpoint when I'd made things tense. Was it when I'd asked why I wasn't included in the planning for Mom's surprise birthday party? Was it when I'd mentioned feeling left out of the cousin group chat? Or was my very existence somehow an affront to their idea of family harmony? I didn't respond to Emma's text, didn't forward the message to anyone for validation or support. I just took a screenshot and saved it in a new folder on my desktop labeled Evidence. I was beginning to understand that whispered cruelty could be just as devastating as screaming matches, maybe more so because it was harder to identify and defend against. That evening, while reheating leftover pasta and trying to distract myself with a mindless TV show, my photo app sent me a memory notification. 3 years ago, a picture of Christmas gifts I'd shipped overnight from my apartment in Charlotte to Linda's house in Greensboro. I remembered that Christmas clearly now. I'd worked late 5 nights straight to afford those presents. There was a bracelet Emma had admired at a summer barbecue, casually mentioning how she'd never owned anything that elegant. I'd searched for weeks to find the exact style, even driving to 3 different jewelry stores to compare quality and prices. There was also a silk scarf in the exact shade of blue Linda used to wear in her old teaching photos, the ones where she looked confident and happy before Dad left and the world became harder. But when I looked at the Christmas morning photos posted on social media that year, all the gift tags had been changed. From all of us, Emma had written proudly in one caption, standing next to a pile of presents that included my carefully chosen contributions. The family gathered around clapping while Emma basked in the gratitude that should have been shared. I had been there that Christmas, sitting on the couch with my coffee, watching the gift exchange with what I thought was familial warmth, but I might as well have been invisible. My gifts were absorbed into the collective, repackaged as group generosity. Not one person corrected Emma's claim of group credit. Not even Linda, who had personally called to thank me for the scarf just 2 days earlier. Now, staring at that old photo, I finally understood. I hadn't just been excluded from this year's Christmas. I'd been systematically erased from family memories for years, my contributions folded into their narrative, while my presence became increasingly optional. The realization felt like finding out that a movie I thought I'd been starring in had actually cast me as an extra. All those years of showing up, contributing, caring, I'd been playing a supporting role in my own family story. That night, I opened my banking app and stared at the upcoming mortgage payment, scheduled to process in 3 days. But this time, instead of just noting the amount, I clicked into the payment history. Transaction after transaction stretched back 36 months. Every single payment tagged Riverside Property, Greensboro, North Carolina. The numbers were staggering when I really looked at them. $1,847.50 every month for 3 years. That was $66,510. I'd quietly transferred from my account to keep a roof over their heads. $66,000 to maintain a house I was no longer welcome to enter. Linda and her family lived in that house, cooked in that kitchen, hosted birthdays and anniversaries in the sunroom I'd helped renovate 2 summers ago. They called it our family home in social media posts and holiday newsletters. Emma's Instagram was full of photos tagged #blessedtobehome and #familytradition, all taken in spaces I was financing. But I was the one keeping the heat on, the lights working, and the mortgage current. I remembered the stress in Linda's voice when she'd first asked for help with the mortgage application. Her credit had tanked after the divorce, and she couldn't qualify on her teacher's retirement income alone. "Just help me get approved," she'd said, sitting at my kitchen table with financial documents spread between us. "Once I get back on my feet, we'll figure out a plan. Maybe add your name to the title or something. You'd be investing in the family home." I opened a password-protected folder on my laptop and found the document that made my stomach turn, the warranty deed from 2020. I had co-signed as a borrower so Linda could qualify for the mortgage after her divorce. It was supposed to be temporary, just until Linda's credit recovered and she could refinance on her own. "Don't worry, honey," Linda had said during a grocery run 3 years ago, frozen peas in her hand and her voice casual as sunshine. "Once we get things stable, I'll add your name to the title. You're investing in the family home." But the paperwork told a different story. Linda's name was on the title as sole owner. My name was only on the loan documents, all the financial responsibility, none of the legal ownership. I'd been paying for a house I could never claim, funding a life I wasn't welcome to share. I sat back in my chair, letting the full weight of the situation settle over me like a heavy blanket. The house I'd been excluded from was the house I'd been paying for. The family that had voted me out was living comfortably on my financial support. The mother who had called me not really family was cashing the checks I sent every month without a single word of gratitude. For the first time, I let the full weight of my situation settle in my chest. I hadn't just been excluded from Christmas dinner. I'd been systematically used, my credit, my income, my reliability, while being slowly erased from the family story. I was the ghost in their financial machine, invisible but essential, unacknowledged but utterly necessary. The betrayal felt different now, deeper than hurt feelings or wounded pride. This was systematic exploitation disguised as family obligation. They had turned my love into their convenience, my loyalty into their security blanket. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The hurt was still there, but underneath it was something stronger, determination. I made myself a full breakfast, eggs, bacon, toast with strawberry jam, and sat at my kitchen table making a list. First, I logged into my online banking and cancelled the automatic mortgage payment. One click, no ceremony, no warning call to Linda. The money stayed in my checking account, quiet and still, as if relieved to finally serve someone who valued its source. But I wasn't finished. I opened my utility account portal and began reviewing the services still registered under my name. Electric, gas, internet, homeowner's insurance, all still in my name from when Linda had asked for just a little help getting back on her feet after the divorce. That temporary assistance had stretched into 3 years of me quietly managing every household expense, while Linda collected the credit for maintaining a beautiful home. I started with the electric company. "I need to cancel service to the Greensboro property," I told the customer service representative. "Are you the primary account holder?" she asked. "Yes, I am. And when would you like service to end?" I thought about it for a moment. Christmas was in 3 days. They were planning their big family celebration, the one I wasn't invited to attend. "December 25th, please. End of business day." I documented each cancellation confirmation number, forwarded every email to a backup account, and created a detailed spreadsheet of service dates and final billing cycles. Gas service terminated December 25th. Internet disconnected December 26th. Home insurance cancelled effective January 1st. I wasn't being petty. I was being thorough. If they wanted to exclude me from the family, they could figure out how to maintain their lifestyle without my financial support. December 25th arrived without fanfare. I made myself a full breakfast, wrapped a small gift for my neighbor's daughter, who always helped carry my groceries upstairs, and settled onto my couch with a book I'd been meaning to finish since October. I'd turned off my phone that morning, wanting to experience Christmas without the anxiety of waiting for messages that wouldn't come or dealing with the fallout from my decisions. But around 6 o'clock, curiosity got the better of me. I turned it back on to find 17 missed calls and a group text I hadn't been part of in weeks. Someone must have added me by accident. Someone called the power company. Everything just went dark in the middle of dinner. Linda's having a meltdown. I checked my email confirmations. December 23rd, service to the Greensboro property will end at 5 p.m. Christmas Day. It was now 6:14 p.m. and they were sitting in darkness. An hour later, another message appeared. Sarah, did you do this? I let my phone go dark without responding. They had their answer the moment Linda's house went black. After 3 years of assuming the lights would always turn on, they were finally learning who had been keeping them illuminated. I imagined them fumbling for flashlights, scrambling to find candles, trying to explain to their dinner guests why the power had suddenly cut out during Christmas dinner. I pictured Linda on the phone with the electric company, frustrated and confused, learning for the first time that the account had never been in her name. "Ma'am, you're not listed as the account holder," the representative would tell her. "You'll need to set up new service in your name." The thought didn't fill me with satisfaction exactly, but it did bring a sense of completion. For 3 years, I'd been the invisible foundation holding up their comfortable life. Now they would learn what that foundation had been worth. 3 days after Christmas, I received a text from a coworker with a link to our local newspaper's website. The headline read, "Linda Martinez hosts annual community potluck celebrating holiday generosity." The article featured a full-color photo of Linda and Emma standing in the kitchen I had paid to renovate, arms around each other, beaming at the camera. My chest tightened as I read the article. It described Linda as a pillar of the community, who opened her beautiful home to neighbors in need every Christmas. The reporter had interviewed several attendees who praised Linda's generosity and the warm atmosphere of her family home. The caption identified them as the generous Martinez family, opening their beautiful home to neighbors in need. Not one mention of my name, not even a footnote acknowledging that the house belonged to someone else, or that the mortgage was paid by a family member who'd been excluded from the celebration. Linda had transformed my financial support into her own public relations triumph. She was getting community recognition for generosity funded by someone she'd called, not really family. The audacity was breathtaking, but my youngest cousin, Rebecca, had been watching the family dynamics with growing discomfort. She was only 22, just finishing college, but she had a sharp sense of justice that reminded me of myself at that age. That afternoon, Rebecca sent me a private message. "I need to show you something. I don't agree with what they did." I recorded part of their meeting. My hands trembled slightly as I downloaded the audio file. Rebecca explained that she'd started recording when the conversation turned cruel, thinking someone should have evidence of what was really being said behind closed doors. The audio file was devastating. Emma's voice came through first, sharp and dismissive. "She's exhausting. Everything she does feels like she wants a medal for being decent." Then Linda's voice, the one that used to sing me lullabies and tell me I was her precious girl. "She's not really family anymore. She's just convenient." Laughter followed. Actual laughter. Uncle Frank's voice joined in. "Keep her name on the paperwork, though. It's easier this way. No need to rock the boat until we figure out our own financing." More laughter. Maya chimed in. "She probably doesn't even realize how much easier her life will be without all our drama." And Emma again. "Trust me, we're doing her a favor." No one objected. No one said that's cruel or she's still my daughter, or maybe we should talk to her directly. They just laughed and moved on to discussing dinner plans, as if they'd just decided which restaurant to avoid rather than which family member to exile. I sat with that recording for hours, playing it back until the words lost their sting and became simple data points. I'd suspected they talked about me behind closed doors, but hearing my mother call me convenient, hearing her laugh about cutting me out of the family, was confirmation of something I'd been afraid to fully acknowledge. I wasn't their daughter or sister or cousin. I was their ATM with an inconvenient personality attached. That night, I created an anonymous email account and began assembling a package. The audio recording went into a clean Google Drive folder. Then I opened a new document titled Statement of Financial Support 2020 present and laid out every transaction, every payment, every contribution I'd made to the house. Linda was now claiming as her charitable venue. Mortgage payments, $66,510 over 36 months. Utility bills, $8,400 over 3 years. Home improvements, $12,000 for the kitchen renovation, sunroom flooring and new appliances. Insurance and property taxes, $4,200 annually for 3 years. The total was staggering, over $90,000 in direct financial support for a house I'd been locked out of, a family that had voted me out, a life I was no longer welcome to share. I addressed the package to 3 recipients: Frank's supervisor at the bank where he worked, the community foundation that had featured Linda in newsletter, and a local journalist who specialized in exposing financial fraud. No signature, no emotional manifesto, just facts they couldn't edit or explain away. Subject line: Linda Martinez, community recognition, financial discrepancies require investigation. I attached the spreadsheet, the audio recording, and copies of every bank statement showing the payments I'd made. Then I hit send on all 3 emails and closed my laptop. By the next evening, the consequences began unfolding like dominoes falling in slow motion. The Community Foundation quietly updated their website, removing Linda's name from the donor recognition page. Rebecca texted me updates throughout the day. They're panicking. Emma's accusing me of betrayal. Linda's in damage control mode, calling everyone to explain the situation. Frank might lose his job. They're investigating his ethics compliance. I replied simply, I didn't declare war. I declared independence. The local newspaper published a brief follow-up article 2 days later. Previous community recognition story retracted due to incomplete information. They didn't name names, but anyone who had read the original story would understand. The following morning, I drove to the bank where I'd originally co-signed the mortgage documents. The building looked the same as it had 3 years ago, but I felt completely different walking through those doors. 3 years ago, I'd been a daughter trying to help her mother. Today I was a woman taking back control of her financial life. I requested a formal transfer of loan responsibility. The process was surprisingly simple. A few signatures, some notarized documents, and Linda became solely responsible for the mortgage she'd been living under for 3 years. You understand you're waiving all rights to the property? The loan officer asked, reviewing my paperwork. I understand, I said, signing my name with steady hands. I never had any rights to begin with. She looked confused by my response, but I didn't elaborate. How could I explain that I was signing away responsibility for a house that represented 3 years of being used by people who claimed to love me? The primary borrower will need to qualify for the full loan amount on her own, she continued. If she can't meet the income requirements, the bank may begin foreclosure proceedings. I nodded. That was Linda's problem now, not mine. She'd wanted to be the sole owner of the family home. Now she could figure out how to keep it without my help. I drove home without fanfare, no victory music playing in my head. Instead, I made myself a real breakfast, bacon, eggs, toast with honey, and sat at my small kitchen table feeling something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. My phone buzzed with angry texts from Emma and frantic calls from Linda, but I didn't answer. I was done explaining myself to people who had never bothered to understand me. Christmas morning of the following year arrived with light snow and absolute silence. No guilt trip messages, no last-minute requests to bring a side dish, no anxiety about whether I'd chosen the right gifts or worn the appropriate outfit. I opened my blinds, made coffee slowly, and wrapped myself in a blanket that smelled only like my own laundry detergent. The silence was different this time. Not the heavy, anxious quiet of waiting for inclusion that would never come, but the peaceful silence of a person who had stopped asking for permission to exist. I spent the day reading, cooking soup from scratch, and video chatting with Rebecca, who had moved across the country for graduate school and found her own distance from the family dynamics. She'd chosen a university as far from home as possible, and I understood why. Sometimes geography is the only way to gain perspective on relationships that have been toxic for so long you've forgotten what healthy feels like. We didn't talk about Linda or Emma or the house. Instead, we discussed Rebecca's research on sustainable agriculture and my plans to travel to Ireland in the spring with money I used to spend on people who saw me as an ATM. We talked about books we were reading, movies we wanted to see, dreams we were finally allowing ourselves to pursue. "You seem different," Rebecca said, toward the end of our call. "Lighter somehow." "I feel lighter," I admitted, "like I've been carrying a weight I didn't realize was there until I set it down." Around noon, I received a cream-colored envelope with my name written in Linda's careful cursive. I recognized the handwriting immediately. She'd taught elementary school for 30 years, and her penmanship was still perfectly controlled. Inside was an expensive-looking card that read, "I know I've made mistakes. I hope someday you'll sit with us again. Love, Mom." No apology, no acknowledgement of specific wrongdoing, no recognition of the financial exploitation or emotional abuse, just hope dangled like bait on a hook, wrapped in the kind of generic sentiment you'd find in a greeting card display. I read it twice, not from confusion but from curiosity about my own reaction. I felt nothing, not anger, not hope, not even disappointment, just a quiet recognition that some bridges burn so completely that even fireproof materials can't rebuild them. She still didn't understand what she'd done wrong. In her mind, this was probably just a family disagreement that time would heal. She had no concept of the systematic betrayal, the calculated cruelty, the years of financial exploitation. To her, I was probably just being dramatic, holding a grudge that would eventually fade if she waited long enough. I put the card in a drawer, not the trash. That small distinction mattered to me. I hadn't stopped caring entirely, but I'd stopped negotiating my worth for acceptance they'd never genuinely offered. 2 years later, my life looked completely different. I'd bought my own small house with a garden where I grew tomatoes and herbs. The mortgage was entirely in my name, and every monthly payment felt like an investment in my own future, rather than a subsidy for people who resented my existence. Rebecca visited twice a year, and we'd developed the kind of honest, supportive relationship I'd always hoped to have with my immediate family. She'd graduated with honors and found a job with an environmental nonprofit. During her visits, we cooked together, hiked local trails, and talked about everything and nothing. She never asked about Linda or Emma, and I never brought them up. Linda still lived in the house I'd helped finance, though I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd had to take on 3 additional jobs to cover the mortgage payments. Emma had moved back in to help with expenses, and their social media posts showed a much quieter, less elaborate lifestyle. The annual community potlucks had ended after the newspaper published their follow-up article about misrepresented charitable contributions. Frank had kept his job but been formally reprimanded for ethics violations. Apparently, the bank took a dim view of employees who advised family members to exploit co-signers for personal gain. He'd had to attend mandatory ethics training and was no longer eligible for promotion. I didn't feel vindicated by their struggles. I felt free from the exhaustion of loving people who saw me as a resource rather than a person, free from the anxiety of trying to earn acceptance from people who had already decided I didn't belong, free from funding a life I was never truly invited to share. I'd learned that forgiveness didn't require reconciliation, and that walking away wasn't giving up. Sometimes it was the most loving thing you could do for yourself. I discovered that my worth wasn't determined by other people's inability to see it, and that peace was worth more than any family gathering built on pretense and financial manipulation. The best part of my new life wasn't what I'd gained, though I had gained a lot, including financial security, emotional peace, and genuine relationships. The best part was what I'd stopped losing. I no longer lost sleep wondering if I'd said something wrong. I no longer lost money funding people who took my generosity for granted. I no longer lost pieces of myself trying to fit into spaces that were never designed to include me. Some days I still felt a pang of sadness when I thought about what my family could have been if they'd chosen love over control, inclusion over convenience. But those pangs were getting rarer and softer, like old injuries that only ache when the weather changes. My story isn't unique, though the specific details might be different from your experience. Maybe you've been the one holding a family together while being made to feel like the problem. Maybe you've funded other people's dreams while being excluded from the celebration. Maybe you've loved people who saw your generosity as weakness rather than strength. If any part of my journey resonated with you, I want you to know that you're not alone. You're not difficult, demanding, or damaged. You're just done being diminished by people who should be lifting you up. I've learned that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is stop accepting crumbs from people who are eating meals you paid for. Sometimes choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. Sometimes walking away isn't giving up, it's growing up. Your worth isn't determined by other people's capacity to see it. You don't need permission to protect your peace, and you don't owe anyone access to your resources, emotional or financial, if they've shown you that your presence doesn't matter to them. The hardest part of my journey wasn't making the decision to leave. It was learning to live without seeking their approval. For months after I cut financial ties, I found myself wanting to call Linda when something good happened, wanting to share achievements with Emma, wanting to believe that this time would be different. But I'd learned to pause in those moments and ask myself, am I reaching out because I genuinely miss these people, or because I'm still trying to prove my worth to people who've already decided I don't have any? Most of the time, it was the latter. And slowly, those impulses faded as I built a life filled with people who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. If this story spoke to your heart, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever had to walk away from family members who took your love for granted? What helped you choose your own peace over trying to prove your worth? Share your story. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you found value in my journey towards self-respect and boundaries, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We're building a community of people who choose authentic relationships over toxic obligations, and your support helps us reach others who need to hear these stories. Remember, you deserve to be loved, not used. You deserve to be celebrated, not tolerated. And you deserve to be chosen, not just convenient. Your worth doesn't decrease because someone else can't see it, and your peace doesn't require anyone else's permission. Thank you for listening to my story, and I'll see you in the next video.